There is a quiet strength in the soul that refuses to be shaken by the noise of the world. It does not come from talent, nor from intellect, nor from the applause of men. It comes from a life fixed on God, where the eyes are steady, the heart is lowly, and the lips are guarded. To focus on God is to lift your gaze beyond the flickering shadows and turn toward the eternal light. It is to believe that in Him lies not only the meaning of life, but the very breath of life itself. The world will tell you to focus on yourself, to measure your worth in possessions, in status, in how loudly you can make your voice heard. But to focus on God is to choose the narrow way, the way of surrender, the way of trust, the way that sees beyond the immediate and longs for the eternal. When the eyes of the soul are fixed on Him, distractions lose their power, temptations lose their shine, and fears lose their grip. It is like standing in the middle of a storm, yet hearing the still small voice that says, "Be still, I am with you." But focusing on God is not enough if the heart is still swollen with pride. For pride blinds us even as we claim to see. Pride whispers that we deserve more, that we are greater, that our ways are wiser than His. Humility, on the other hand, opens the eyes. It bows low not in weakness but in reverence, not in shame but in truth. To humble yourself before God is to acknowledge that every good gift is from Him, that every breath is borrowed, and that without Him we are dust returning to dust. True humility is not thinking less of yourself. It is thinking of yourself less. It is making room for God to be God, and then comes the silence. In a world that shouts, argues, and insists on being heard, silence has become a forgotten strength. To stay silent is not always to remain mute. It is to resist the urge to defend, to retaliate, to prove oneself. Silence is the soil where wisdom grows. It is the pause in which God's voice can be heard more clearly. Sometimes our words only add to the confusion, but our silence can become a testimony of trust. It says, "I do not need to answer every insult. I do not need to win every argument. I do not need to justify myself, for the one who sees in secret will speak on my behalf in His time." Focus on God, humble yourself, stay silent. These are not three separate paths, but one. The focus lifts your eyes, humility bows your heart, and silence guards your tongue. Together, they form a life that is not swayed by every storm, not inflated by every success, not shattered by every criticism. It is a life hidden in God, unshaken because it is anchored in the eternal. Lift your eyes beyond the noise and distractions of the world, anchoring your life in His eternal light and guidance. When you truly focus on God, everything around you begins to take on a different meaning, for the lens through which you look at life changes completely. To focus on God is not a momentary glance during times of trouble. It is a steady gaze, a discipline of the soul that refuses to look away even when distractions and storms rage. It is choosing to lift your eyes above the glitter of success, above the pressure of comparison, above the shadows of fear, and to place your sight firmly on the One who is unchanging. When the heart is fixed on God, the things of this world begin to lose their control, because their power to satisfy fades when measured against His greatness. Many people live constantly looking side to side, trying to measure their worth against others, always seeking approval, always caught in the rush of temporary gains. But when you focus on God, you stop being enslaved by what others think and begin to live in the freedom of knowing what He thinks of you. His gaze is steady, His love is sure, and His presence becomes the compass that guides every step. Focusing on God means that in prayer, you do not come only with requests but with attention, listening for His voice in the stillness, recognizing His fingerprints in the details of your daily life. It means seeing His hand not just in the spectacular miracles, but in the quiet mercies, in the sunrise that meets you, in the breath you draw, in the way He holds the universe together, yet still holds your heart. To focus on God is to trust that He is the author of your story even when you cannot read the next chapter. It is to believe that His ways are higher, His thoughts are wiser, and His timing is perfect, even when it collides with your impatience. The eyes of the soul are always tempted to wander. The world parades distractions, constantly urging you to fix your gaze on wealth, on applause, on recognition, on endless noise. But every distraction, no matter how enticing, eventually fades, leaving behind emptiness if it is not rooted in God. That is why focusing on Him is an act of constant redirection, like a sailor fixing his compass back to the north when storms push him off course. You bring your mind back, your heart back, your will back, because you know that in Him alone lies the stability your soul longs for. When your focus is right, your perspective shifts. Problems no longer appear as unconquerable giants, but as opportunities to see His power at work. Success no longer intoxicates you with pride, but humbles you as evidence of His favor. Even failure does not crush you, because your eyes are not on your weakness, but on His strength. Focusing on God is not about ignoring the realities of life. It is about seeing them through His truth. It is about knowing that every trial can refine you. Every delay can teach you patience. Every blessing can call you to gratitude. To focus on Him is to place eternity in your view, to live as though what is unseen is more real than what is seen. When your heart learns to do this, worry loses its hold. Fear begins to fade, because your confidence is no longer built on shifting sand, but on the solid rock of His promises. To focus on God is to walk through life with a steady rhythm, not rushing in anxiety, not lagging in despair, but moving with the assurance that every step is within His sight. This kind of focus requires discipline, for the world will fight for your attention every day. It calls you to fill your mind with His Word so that truth can silence lies. It calls you to guard your heart so that desires are not swayed by fleeting passions. It calls you to live with awareness, to notice the nudges of His Spirit, to see His reflection in the people around you, to trust His hand even when it seems hidden. The mind that is focused on God is not easily shaken by criticism, not easily deceived by flattery, not easily tempted by shortcuts, because it has found a higher gaze. And the beauty of it is that the more you focus on Him, the more you become like Him. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, your thoughts align with His, your words echo His truth, your actions reflect His character. To focus on God is to choose clarity over confusion, stillness over chaos, and trust over doubt. It is to fix your gaze on the one who never changes, who was, who is, and who will always be. In Him, your soul finds its anchor, your mind its peace, your heart its rest, and your purpose its meaning. Lay down pride and self-importance, recognizing that every gift and every breath comes from Him. To humble yourself is to discover a posture of the heart that the world rarely applauds, but that heaven treasures deeply. Humility is not weakness, nor is it the denial of the gifts you carry. It is the recognition that every gift is given, every ability is sustained, and every success rests upon a foundation you did not build. When you humble yourself before God, you acknowledge that life itself is borrowed breath, that every sunrise is a mercy, that every step is upheld by His strength. Pride insists on self-importance, constantly demanding recognition, always seeking to be first, to be honored, to be lifted higher. Yet humility bows low and trusts that the one who exalts in due season knows when and how to lift you. To humble yourself is to say, I am not my own, I am not the source, I am not the master of my destiny, for my life belongs to the one who formed me. Humility is the doorway to wisdom, because a proud heart cannot be taught. It resists correction, it despises guidance, it demands to be right. But a humble spirit listens, learns, receives, and grows. Humility allows you to admit weakness without shame, because it knows that strength is made perfect there. It allows you to confess wrong without fear, because it knows forgiveness flows freely to the honest. It allows you to rejoice in the success of others without envy, because it knows there is no competition in grace. The proud live in constant comparison, always measuring themselves against others, always threatened, always insecure. But the humble find peace because they rest in God's definition of their worth. To humble yourself before God is to realize that you stand on holy ground every moment, that without Him nothing holds together, that even your wisdom is foolishness compared to His, and even your righteousness is rags compared to His purity. Yet humility is not self-loathing. It is not walking with your head down in despair or believing you are worthless. True humility knows its worth but recognizes that its worth comes from God. It is standing tall as a child of the King while bowing low as a servant of His will. It is refusing to exalt yourself while allowing God's glory to shine through you. It is knowing that the stage is not yours, the applause is not for you, the story is not written by your hand. Humility frees you from the crushing burden of pride. Pride demands constant defense, constant justification, constant proving of yourself, but humility is light. It releases the need to impress. It releases the need to control. It releases the need to always be right. When you humble yourself, you are no longer bound by the chains of ego, no longer enslaved to the opinion of others. You can serve without needing to be noticed. You can give without needing to be thanked. You can work without needing to be praised, because you know the one who sees in secret rewards openly in His own way. Humility is also the soil where love can truly grow. A proud heart cannot love fully, for pride is always self-centered, always demanding, always seeking to be served. But humility makes room for compassion. It listens, it forgives, it bears patiently. It does not consider itself above others. Humility looks at the broken and does not despise them, because it knows it too is only standing by grace. Humility looks at enemies and chooses mercy, because it knows vengeance belongs to God. Humility looks at the ordinary tasks of life and finds dignity there, because nothing is too small when done for His glory. To humble yourself requires surrender. It requires letting go of the illusion that you are in control, releasing the grip of self, will, bowing your heart in obedience. It requires quiet trust when God's plans differ from yours, patience when His timing delays what you long for, faith when His ways seem hidden. The proud demand answers immediately. They cannot endure mystery, but the humble walk steadily even in the dark, knowing the shepherd leads them still. Humility is not natural to the human heart. It is forged in the presence of God. The more you behold His greatness, the more you see your smallness, yet the more you also realize the depth of His love for you. That paradox produces awe, and awe always bends the knee. Humility is the very character of Christ reflected in the life of those who follow Him. It is choosing the lower place when you could have claimed the higher. It is serving when you could have demanded to be served. It is forgiving when you could have condemned. The world sees humility as weakness, but in truth it is the strongest foundation, for only the humble can carry the weight of true authority. Only the humble can endure the blessing without being destroyed by pride. Only the humble can be trusted with influence because they know it is not for themselves. Humility is not a single act but a continual choice, a daily bowing of the heart, a continual remembering that He is God and you are not, that He is the source and you are the vessel, that He is the potter and you are the clay. Resist the urge to defend or exalt yourself, allowing silence to become the space where God's wisdom and voice are heard most clearly. To stay silent is to embrace a strength that most people overlook. For in silence there is a discipline of the soul that words can never achieve. Silence is not the absence of thought, it is the presence of restraint. It is not emptiness, but fullness waiting to be revealed at the right time. In a world that rewards noise, that demands constant expression, that urges you to defend, explain, argue, and justify, silence becomes an act of defiance against the chaos. To stay silent is to declare that your peace does not depend on winning arguments, that your dignity does not rest on the approval of the crowd, that your confidence is rooted in something higher than the applause or criticism of people. Silence is not weakness, it is mastery of self. Anyone can speak quickly, anyone can lash out, anyone can return insult for insult, but it takes a deep inner strength to remain still, to hold the tongue, to wait for wisdom instead of rushing into folly. There are moments in life when silence is the only language that truth requires. Words can so easily be twisted, so easily misunderstood, so easily wasted. But silence carries a weight that no speech can carry. When you stay silent in the face of accusation, you show that your vindication comes not from your defense, but from the one who knows the heart. When you stay silent in the midst of provocation, you reveal that anger has no power over you, that you are not a slave to your emotions. When you stay silent instead of boasting of your achievements, you show that your worth is not defined by what others see, but by what God has already spoken over you. Silence is often the highest expression of trust, for it declares, I do not need to prove myself. I do not need to justify myself, because my life is in the hands of God who sees, who knows, who will answer in His time. Staying silent is not the same as being passive. It does not mean avoiding responsibility or refusing to speak when truth must be defended. There is a time to speak, but silence teaches you to wait until the right time. A word spoken in haste can wound, but a word spoken in wisdom can heal. Silence gives space for wisdom to ripen, for perspective to form, for anger to cool, for truth to emerge with clarity. It is in silence that thoughts settle, that emotions lose their frenzy, that the still small voice of God can be heard. Those who never practice silence often drown in their own noise, unable to hear anything beyond the echo of their own opinions. But those who choose silence find guidance. They learn to discern when to speak and when to remain quiet. They learn that not every battle is theirs to fight. Not every accusation deserves a response. Not every provocation requires a reaction. The greatest lessons are often learned in silence. When you sit still before God without rushing into words, you begin to sense His presence more deeply. When you withhold words in conversation, you discover more by listening than by speaking. When you stay silent in trials, you learn the art of patience, the strength of endurance, the humility of waiting. Silence becomes a shield against regret, for words once spoken cannot be taken back, but silence leaves room for grace. Many wounds are caused not by actions but by careless words, yet how many of those could have been spared by a moment of silence? Silence is also an act of surrender. It is to stop striving to control every narrative, to stop grasping for the last word, to stop fighting for recognition. It is to lay down the right to be heard, the right to be understood, the right to be praised, and to let God speak for you when He chooses. The proud cannot stay silent because their ego demands constant attention, but the humble can remain quiet because they know their worth does not come from noise. To stay silent is to mirror the strength of Christ, who in the face of false accusations remained quiet, who in the presence of mockery did not retaliate, who trusted the judgment of the Father above the voices of men. That kind of silence is not weakness, it is supreme confidence in the justice of God. In relationships, silence can be an act of love. It holds back harsh words that would cut deeply. It restrains anger that would harm. It pauses long enough to allow understanding to grow. In conflicts, silence prevents escalation. It breaks the cycle of retaliation. It creates a space where peace can enter. In times of suffering, silence allows the heart to sit with pain honestly without covering it with shallow words. There are silences that speak louder than any speech, silences that carry dignity, silences that radiate patience, silences that testify to a heart anchored in God. To stay silent is not easy because the human heart craves to be heard, to be justified, to be right. Yet silence is a discipline that trains the soul to look upward instead of outward, to trust God's voice above all others. It is not the absence of courage, but the presence of wisdom, not the lack of conviction, but the strength to wait. In silence, pride is humbled, emotions are tamed, and the soul is steadied. Silence becomes a sanctuary where truth can dwell, a fortress where peace can rest, a testimony that faith is stronger than fear.